Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, have you ever been in the middle of a speech, or maybe you're standing up in front of your team at a staff meeting, or your family for a holiday meal, and you just felt like you were losing your audience? You just knew that they had checked out? Well, I am so excited for this episode of the Speak with People podcast, because as you know, listeners, every single episode, we try to provide you incredible content that will help you communicate with clarity, with confidence, with impact. And so today we're diving into something that really every leader struggles with, and that's how to keep an audience from start to finish. Even if it's your kids in the living room, your staff in a staff meeting, or if you're presenting in front of people, we have all been there. And what I'm blown away today by our guest, I've followed online and have learned just an absolute ton. His name is Jimmy Cannon. He's an expert in public speaking, performance coaching, in vocal coaching. And we're going to dive into a bit of the psychology of audience attendance, practical strategies, and we're going to try to walk away knowing how to command the room a little bit better, hold engagement, and speak without fear. If you go to Jimmy's website, it says that right on that. And that just grabbed my attention because, as you know, listeners, we talk to a lot of leaders who we have some fear when we speak in front of people. So if you want to be a speaker that people actually listen to, this episode's for you. Jimmy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. As you can probably tell, I'm from the UK. So just forgive me for everything. Forgive us for everything right now.
Well, I do have to ask, and I don't mean to start with a stereotype, so I apologize.
Yeah.
One of my good friends is from the UK. He lives here in the States now, but he says brilliant. I mean, this is like his phrase. You know, he'll say
The
brilliant a
word
lot.
brilliant.
Yes, is that a very UK thing?
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I I say, what do we
Yes.
say? We say mate. Do we
Yes.
say mate? I think that's I don't say that word actually because I'm Middle England. I'm very middle. I'm estuary, you see.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, I wouldn't say I'm royalty, but no, I'm so my friend says absolutely and brilliant quite a lot. Yes, it's a very English thing. Yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. Sorry, a little tangent, but my favorite
Yeah.
rock band of all time is Hootie and the Blowfish. I don't know if you remember Hootie and the Blowfish,
Yep.
but Christmas a couple years ago, I got a Hootie scarf, and I wore it once when I saw my friend Dave from the UK, and he's like, "Oh wow, if you're finally dressing up a little bit, by wearing a scarf." And so I thought, okay, I've learned something.
Fantastic.
Well, hey, before we hop
Excellent.
into the conversation, why don't you
Yeah.
give our listeners a little bit of your story, who you are, what you do, what's got you to this place? Would
Sure.
love to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose I've transitioned from being a singer predominantly, and I'm a saxophone player and a singer in England, obviously, and in London mainly. And the kind of very long story short, I was at a party, and I was involved in the Eurovision Song Contest. That you must know the Eurovision Song Contest. So I was
Yes.
involved in co-writing a song. Blah blah blah. Anyway, that's another thing. Um, and we were at the party, and I was talking to a chap, and I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm in advertising, and I said, I'm really interested in this, and he said, "What do you do?" Well, I'm a singer, but I'm a songwriter. But I'm interested in the voice and the speaking voice. He said, "Oh my God, we all weekly we have to do presentations. We have to give a presentation to the rest of the team, and if we had some training." then I would feel much more comfortable and much more confident in doing it, because I
Mm.
hate getting up. I hate standing up and doing it, right? So then, I mean, this was 15 years ago. So I thought, this is, bigging, some sort of moment there. So since then, I thought this is interesting. This could be something that I could do when because as a singer, your career doesn't like go that. I mean, I'm still singing, but I'm not doing 8 shows a week anymore. And I've got
Mm.
kids. I'm thinking, blah, blah, blah. So life gets in the way. And I'm thinking, how can I change? How can I transfer these skills? So tell me to shush in a minute, because I will just talk about myself, and hopefully
You're
not too
great.
much.
I love this.
Okay, fine. So I thought that was interesting. That was the beginning of it. I ended up going through a whole journey of discovery, etc. But I ended up thinking that I was going to, like a lot of your audience, helping people who are already speakers, who are already professional speakers, and they wanted just to up their game and just to project their voice maybe a little bit more, or find more resonance in the voice, etc., etc. Just a little bit of CPD. So that wasn't the case. And I don't know why that was, but most of the people coming to me, this was face to face before the dark days, or the dark days. I think someone said the dark days to me, and so this was face to face. And I thought, well, this is going to be great. I'm going to be, working with these types of people. Invariably, what happened was people were coming to me with what they felt was a weak voice, or a lack of confidence in their voice, that a feeling of that their voice just wasn't being heard. So the
Mm.
perception of themselves, or sometimes the perception of other people. So maybe they've had HR say, "Look, we think you need to improve your communication skills, because they're kind of detrimental to the message of the company and the brand, etc."
Yep.
So that's what I do now. So everything sort of transitioned into that. So the interesting thing was that most of the people coming to me were thinking that they had this weak monotone voice, which they could have done, but most people, unless they speak like that all the time, don't have this monotone voice. Really, it's mainly a lack of confidence in themselves. They're either they're self-judging, or they have imposter syndrome, or lack of self-worth, or they just don't feel they fit in for some reason, and their voice is their number one port of call
Ooh.
to their message.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I can see your I can I can see your debating in your head this, and deciphering it, but and digesting, I suppose. But so that's what I do now. So I said most people come to me thinking it's the voice, but actually it's a lack of confidence about something. There's a stop, like any anxiety. There's a barrier, or they're stuck somewhere, and that's what I help people. So just briefly, without ironically boring your audience, I ended up doing a master's in voice pedagogy, because I wanted to learn more about the voice and the physiology of the voice.
Wow.
Within that, I because I was a singer for 20 years and didn't know, I hadn't a clue what I was doing. So I thought that if I was going to do this professionally, as in if I was going to help people speak more confidently, I ought to find out exactly what I was talking about. So I did that probably 8, 9 years ago now. And after that, I ended up studying as a behavioral therapist, and I studied acceptance and commitment therapy, because I wanted to find out a little bit more about the psychology and the behavioral aspects of why
Mm.
people were feeling like they were feeling. So it's a holistic approach. This is what my method, if you like, the Canon method, and then it's a holistic approach to that. So invariably, what happens is that when I help people with their voice, and they feel more comfortable with their voice, more confident with their voice, they then feel more confident. So it's a sort of a it's a circle, really, that reinforces that.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. Whew. Yeah, it's powerful. So, what's really curious to me is the more literal side of the voice. How many come to you and just are like, I just hate how my voice sounds.
Mm. Nearly everyone.
Yeah.
Nearly everyone
Okay.
comes to me.
All
Right,
right. I'm
and
not
it's
in the.
incredible. Well, yeah, no, no, not at all. No, and here's the thing: most people come to me, and they're on. We're on having a discovery call like this, and I'm thinking there's nothing wrong with your voice. Your voice is absolutely fine, but that doesn't help them. It doesn't help them that I think their voice is fine. It doesn't help them that their colleagues think their voice is fine. they think that their voice is terrible. They really hate their voice. The
Yes.
really interesting thing is, and I don't want to come off patronizing if this is a known thing, is that what we hear when we speak is not what other people hear.
Mm.
So what we hear is the binaural resonance of our speaking voice mainly, and what other people hear is the first reflection, depending on where we are. So if it's face to face, then they're listening to the reflection that's coming off one of the walls. So it's the first reflection that comes off. That's what they hear. So that's already being manipulated in an acoustic fashion.
Wow.
But what we hear is the binaural effect. So the binaural is the acoustic energy or the reverberant energy within the head cavity. So that's what you hear when you speak. So I can give you right now, if you want, a quick exercise to improve the sound of your voice and find an authenticity to your voice. Would that be a good timing to
Yes,
do
this
that?
is
Okay, I
amazing.
do. Okay, fantastic. So if you and Jason, you can do this with me if you want.
Yep.
You need two. Well, you need one hand. And I haven't seen your hand yet. There's one. Okay, sorry. Right here. Show me the other one. Otherwise, I'm doubting you. Okay. Right, fantastic. So one hand, 2 inches away from your mouth, and then I want you to put the other hand, cup your ear, and stand on one leg. No, I'm only joking. So cup your ear with the other hand. Okay,
Yep.
and then talk.
Hello, Jimmy. Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it's gone. Just carry on for 10 seconds and tell me how you feel. And you can
Wow.
play around
Yes.
with the distance as well.
Yes, absolutely. Boy, I I don't know. I'm 49 and I'm just now doing this for the very first time, and I do hear it very differently.
Yeah, so that's probably the most accurate representation of how
Wow.
you sound.
Okay.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
I about spit up my drink the other day. I was in a podcast episode. I went to take a drink, and someone said, "Oh, you just have a great radio voice," and I was like,
Mm,
because because I fall into that category who I've never liked the sound of my voice. I'm like, I don't have a radio voice. Like, I was a music major and
mm,
sang forever, and I only did it out of necessity because nobody else would step up and do it. And so I'm like, oh, back in my wannabe singer days, I was like, only if I, had a better sounding voice.
mm.
And it's just amazing how we convince ourselves of those things.
Absolutely, yeah, and I can tell that you were singing. I can tell that you've got a radio voice, and I tell you why, because you have access to your chest resonance. So
Hmm.
you have a natural vocal creak, which is not a detrimental thing, not a negative thing. It's just where you are. But you're able to access this area here as well, so you're kind of going down there in here as well. But you can also go up there,
Right.
which is really good. So you have a big range, right?
Yeah.
Because probably because yeah, sorry.
I love it. No, and I'll never forget my trumpet professor. So I was a
Mm,
trumpet major. So
yep,
you
yep.
know, I try to get along with woodwinds. So I was brass first to woodwinds. Nothing
Never the
worse than
twain.
being in an orchestra as a trumpet player and waiting, you know,
52
7
bars.
pages. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I can still hear my trumpet professor, Dr. Eggers, say, "It's the diaphragm, rates. It's the diaphragm. Use the diaphragm."
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. That's that memory will stay with you forever, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
He played in the Boston Philharmonic years and years and years. I mean, this is forever ago. And I'll never
Mm,
forget him. One day in one of our lessons, he's picked up his trumpet and he just said, "It's as simple as," and he just played. And I was like, what just happened? It was, magic of what happened. And
mm,
I wonder if that's part of the thing you love about what you do is,
mm,
being able to see your the people that you coach come in one way and then
mm.
leave being able to go, okay, now I can communicate this way.
Definitely, and that's a wonderful feeling. And whenever I'm lucky to have a testimonial, which is reasonably often, but sometimes because of the nature of what we're doing, it can be confidential, or people don't feel very confident in ironically in giving a testimonial. But when I do get one, it's normally it is the transition that we focus on, and it's normally, it is, and this sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, excuse the pun, but it is life changing, this sort of
Yeah.
thing, and it's you know, people can suddenly walk into a room or party or meeting and not feel the like the prior of the, of the room, and or the person that is just hasn't got the knowledge or is not respected or whatever it might be that they're feeling. And
Yes.
that's a lot to do with with there's lots of reasons, but it's a lot to do with the anxiety that they're feeling for whatever reason, and obviously that comes out in their voice.
Oh, so good. Okay, so
Yeah,
walk us through. We have a lot of
yeah,
everyday marketplace leaders and listen to this podcast, and there are moments where they're sitting in a team meeting and their boss says, "Okay, hey, I need you to stand up and give an update on what you're working on." And for a lot of
yeah,
people, ooh, they freeze at that point, partly
mm,
because maybe they didn't have time to prepare, or they just don't
mm,
like speaking in front of people.
mm, mm.
You know, why is that? What do you think are some of the contributing factors to be able to recognize? I mean, I know, they're probably somewhat obvious, but just wondered from your point of
Yeah,
view.
absolutely. So symptoms are going to be raised heart rate, palms sweating, and very fast speech.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's something that's very common. And so there's, and just the whole sort of anxiety around them, and so that's the physical symptoms. But there's also behavioral symptoms where they might be, not looking at the rest of the room, so all of a sudden it's a fog, and you can't focus on the whole room and all the people because you don't want to be looked at, so you're looking at the floor. And then suddenly posture and behavioral therapy, things come into that. Then of course there's the cognitive side of things, where you are fused with any sort of negative feelings or thoughts that are occurring at the time. Now those negative thoughts will probably come out in a somatic response, so as in a physiological response. So the short breaths, the raised heartbeat, as I'm doing now, because I can't get my words out, so what I'm going to do, take a breath, the quick pace of the speech.
Yep.
That's going to be something that you're going to be very aware of, and that's because you're fused with the thoughts that you might be having either previously or, you know at the time of the standing up and being, and obviously you're thinking, well, and these might be literal thoughts, so they might be either physical or literal thoughts, so such as I might they might you might be thinking, well, I'm going to be judged now, I'm going to feel that I'm being uh you know not listened to properly, or I'm not respected, or
Right.
people are going to be judging me, so these are very, very natural thoughts that we all go through. And that's so that's there's a lot going on, and if you don't prepare yourself for that, if you don't prepare yourself to manage that, then it doesn't matter how much preparation you've done. And
Right.
right, so in a way, it's a bit of a godsend for it to be spontaneous and unprepared, because you can sort of, well, you can start saying or start thinking, well, I'm not prepared for this. And of course, if you're someone that really, really relies on preparation before, and you want to be organized and have everything, all the i's dotted and the t's crossed, then you're going to really suffer.
Mm.
And if you're someone that needs to have a script, needs to know exactly what they're going to say, and have the information there and all in order, and it needs to be succinct, then it's going to be a big struggle. So that spontaneous conversation like we're having now is really hard to do if you've suddenly been asked a question, as you've asked me, which is a perfectly viable question because this is what I do,
Yeah.
but I haven't prepared for that specific question, so I'm having to, get that out
Yeah.
and give the answer to you.
Boy, the thoughts. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
amazing how much, for so much of our lives, it comes back to all the negative thoughts. I mean, because if you wake up in the
Yep.
morning and you're like, oh, I got that presentation, I'm going to do
Yep.
horribly, I'm not prepared.
Yep.
Well, then guess what? You're
Mm.
not going to, I mean, the odds are probably pretty good you're not going to do well.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's all straight away. You're giving yourself a heart. You're giving yourself a bed to lie on. Absolutely for sure. So yes. So you know, the answer. And there's lots of answers, but the answer is, in that situation, the answer is if you're asked to suddenly stand up in a spontaneous fashion, then you haven't got control over the data. You haven't got control over the information. You've just got control over you and the confidence that you have about your expertise and what you do. That's the only thing that you can have, the relationship between yourself and what we said earlier when we were chatting beforehand was to sometimes that you need to ignore that. You need to ignore yourself. You need to just
Mm.
ignore how you feel and think about what the result is for the audience that you're talking to. So the audience in this case would be a team or your colleagues, and the result is going to be that they want to go away with either information or a feeling of a change or a transition or change of feeling depending on the topic. So that focusing on that and focusing what's called committed action towards that value, as in the result that you want from that talk, is what you need to focus on, and that it does need practicing. So there's a whole thing about that which I'm happy to talk about, but
Well,
I'll wait for your question. Yeah.
yeah, that's great that you bring that up because we do have speakers that listen to this, or we have people
Mm,
who are routinely doing sales presentations, whether it's 2 minutes, 20 minutes, or they're doing Zoom calls and they're having to present in front of the team. What do you recommend? And do you
mm,
recommend having some type of pre-ritual breathing
mm.
exercises, something that you do regularly? And then if you do recommend it, what are some of those things that just kind of help prepare you before you're gonna go speak? Because I know for me
Mm,
sometimes, yeah, even
mm,
after all, I don't know how many hundreds of times I've been on a stage,
mm.
I mean, I'm sitting in the front row and I'm like, why did they ask me? Like, what am I gonna, like, what's
Yeah,
gonna happen?
yeah,
But for
yeah,
me, I've run myself through. So I'd love your expertise on that.
absolutely. So if it all depends on it, whether you've got time, whether there's space, whether
Yes.
you can get there early, and all these sort of logistical issues. But let's just say that you're doing. Well, give me an example. Would it be? You said it would be a sales presentation on a conference in a conference, or it would be
Yeah.
to a
Yeah. I'd say
team, or
sales at a conference and
at a conference. Great. Okay.
yeah.
So, okay, here's the breakdown, and it depends on how whether you've got the time, etc., and the lag to be able to do that. So, a few things that you might not have heard of before, which I think is really interesting, is that what I've done over the years as a performer on stage, is to get to the venue early. So this is something that I learned from another performer friend of mine. So you get to the venue. You don't just go to the hotel room, or you check in. You don't stay in the hotel room, or you don't stay in the green room, or you don't stay in the wings and talk. Talk to
Yep.
your colleague or the agent. You walk around the room. So as the waiters are kind of putting all the knives and everything down, and straightening out everything on the table, maybe the AV guys are setting up. You get there a couple of hours early, and you start chatting, right? So you're talking, you're getting to see, hi, how are you? Great, I'm good. How are you? How couple of hours? Brilliant, fantastic. So you start talking. You just kind of, yeah, I'm Jimmy. Hi, I'm gonna be performing. But listen, don't worry about me. Carry on, whatever it might be, right? Try
Yep.
to be humble and polite, and just and talk to people. So you're getting an idea of people are getting to know you. You're getting accustomed to the acoustic and space in the room, right? And this is a little bit a bit sort of a little bit maybe, but this is from a brace yourselves. This
Okay.
is from a guru of speech, a lady called Patsy Rodenberg, and she wrote a book called Presence, which is a fantastic book, and would be happy to talk about a little bit more about that later on. But there's one technique that she uses, which is that you breathe into the corners of the room. Now, it doesn't matter what the size of the room is. So let's let's say that we're in that conference room, we're walking around, it could be on stage, but what we do is we breathe into all of the corners of the room. We're walking around. Now you can't do this when there's people talking around, but you can sort of walk around the room and you can breathe or speak
Yep.
into the corner of the room. And give that, not now, but give, unless you want to, but give that a go next time that you're in a either a meeting room. If you've got 2 minutes just to get into the room, get familiar with the space, because by breathing into the space and or speaking into the space before you start speaking, sort of takes ownership of that acoustic space in the room, and you'll feel that your sound of your voice is already, before you start speaking, so has already started to fill the space and project within that space, and it's incredibly effective to do that. So that's one thing I I would do, and that's,
Yeah.
a couple of hours before,
Yep.
if you've got time. The other thing is I would definitely warm up my voice. So I'm
Mm.
happy to, shall I share a couple of warm up
Yeah,
exercises?
that'd be great.
Would that be good? I'm just going to take a sip of water. Hang on, here we go. Water's absolutely key. So hydration, really, really key. Try not to drink coffee. I'm a massive coffee fan. So it's terrible, but I try not to drink coffee, and certainly not alcohol. Before, none of the Dutch courage is going to help. With, even with severe anxiety. So, definitely not that. But so water, really good idea. So what you want to do is, I do this particular exercise, and Jason, I can make you. How do you feel about looking a little bit silly on your own podcast? Do you
I
feel
love it.
okay with that? Okay, great. So what we're going to do is, I'll do the whole thing first. We're going to do what's called a lip trill. So you might know this anyway, but so this is like this. Okay. Now,
Yep.
if you haven't done it before, start making a sound like a horse. So like this. Perfect. Perfect. Great. So what do you want to try? You want to try to keep this nice and tight and wide. So just do this for me. 2 fingers, and just lift your cheekbones and tighten your lips, and do it again. Perfect. That's great. That's really good. That's great. Wonderful. So the idea is to try to keep that going as long as you can, but then bring in a tone.
Mm.
Right. So we are. I'll explain how that works in a minute. So we're going to go. We're going to start low, like a siren. So we're going to do a siren. Start low.
Trying to do both.
That's good. That's great. That wasn't something else. No, okay. Yeah, it's great. That's fantastic. Well done. That's really good. So that was in your head voice, right? You know this, but that was
Yes.
in your head voice, which is great. So what you want to try to do is come down into your chest voice eventually, right? So imagine that you start in your head voice, which sometimes is easier. So
Yeah.
all the way down. Okay.
Okay.
So do that a couple of times before you walk on stage. It's difficult to find the confidence to do that. So you might want to go to find the bathroom, or we say the toilet, somewhere, and maybe find a little corridor where you can make some noise. So that's really, really great to do. And what it does is it takes the energy away from the larynx, because we tend to speak too much in the throat, and that strains the voice after a while. So if you're doing lots of speaking gigs, and you're speaking all day at conferences and meetings, etc., then this is a great way just to alleviate. It's called a semi-occluded vocal tract exercise, and it takes away the energy away from the vocal tract. There we are.
Ooh. No, that is gold.
Yeah,
Let's move on to the next part then.
sure.
A famous philosopher once said, "Your body is a wonderland." I don't know if he was a famous philosopher, but the singer John Mayer, in a song, talked about the body. Now I know that he's talking about something else, but
Yeah.
how important it is? How important is it for us? How we carry
Mm.
ourselves? How we, what are some of the best things we can do as a speaker, even if it's one on one or in front of people?
Mm.
How to carry ourselves with our body?
Amazing. Yeah, I love that question. So it's incredibly important. So, the first sort of 4 or 5 seconds before you start speaking, obviously people are making judgments and observations about how you come on stage and how you communicate on stage non-verbally. So firstly, just think about, well, how am I communicating? Am I looking at the floor? Am I looking to the audience? Am I
Mm.
registering the person that's introduced me? Am I using my eye contact? With that. The thing about the voice is that if your chin is down, if you're hunched up, if you're round shoulders slightly, it's going to change the quality of your voice. You're not going to be able to resonate. So the secret to projection and volume is not actually more air over the vocal folds, or pushing more air. It's actually resonance. So creating more resonance in the chest cavity. And the best way to do that is to think about how you're creating this openness when you're speaking here. So I don't know whether you can hear the difference, and don't humor me. It's fine if you can't. But there should be a difference in my voice as I'm opening my sound out. I'm thinking about speaking
Yep.
from here,
Yep.
and not sort of, I'm exaggerating here, but and not from the throat here. So the posture, it doesn't have to be, like this, but keeping this open
Yes.
posture not only is going to help the resonance of the voice, it's going to give you an open gesture to your audience. So as you walk in, that open gesture is going to say, I want to communicate with you. I'm happy to communicate. So posture is incredibly important, and I would definitely recommend a very simple exercise. I'm not going to do it now because it involves lying on the floor, and we might fall asleep because it's for me it's quite late. But which is called semi supine, which comes from Alexander technique, and it's a great way just to I do it if I'm tired and my neck's hurting and I've got I'm doing a concert or a gig, or I'm speaking somewhere or doing a workshop, or whatever it might be, and I need to find the energy and I'm a bit tired, right? So I do this for a couple of minutes. I lie on the floor, my back on the floor, my head supported, my knees up, my feet flat on the floor, and I breathe in a particular way, which I'd need to show you how to do. I'm happy to show you how to breathe correctly, but deep breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, and what happens is you're releasing your lower back. So your lower back is something that needs to be, so the transversal abdominal muscles need to contract and allow space within that the cavity and the rib cage. There's lots of stuff going on, but it's a great exercise to do lying down, just deep breathing. It just relaxes everything. So when you stand up, you feel sort of slightly lightheaded, but it's a wonderful thing because you're suddenly more grounded, and that's the key, is to feel grounded. So to feel connected with literally the ground and the stage that you're on, which is then connected obviously to the audience. So that's the first thing, is to try to practice feeling grounded where you are, whether that's sitting. Most of my clients are sort of like this, or hi Jimmy,
Yep.
so right, so it's the same thing with standing. If you're standing behind a lectern and you're like this, as you're speaking, people aren't going to listen, because all they're doing is thinking about, I wish he'd just relax, or which he would, just come out of the lecture and just, this. You're a
Yep.
professional. This is what you do. So, but from a voice perspective, I would say that posture is incredibly important to create more resonance.
Boy, that's so good. Uh, your opinion, what's the psychology behind some people checking out during presentations? I mean, uh, some people are going to
Yeah.
check out because, they have short attention span, all that kind of stuff. But,
Mm,
what are some of the common mistakes we make up front or as we're speaking that
mm.
helps people to check out?
Yeah. So novelty, really, and variety. So if people are checking out, they're being distracted. And if they're being distracted, it means that you're not creating variety in your voice.
Oof. Yes.
So I mean, this is just a verbal, not non-verbal, just purely verbal. And obviously this would make sense because this is what I do. So if you're not creating, so what I tend to think about three main elements here. So I talk about pitch range, tonality, and dynamic range. So pitch is your vocal register, or how we talked about your voice, particularly got a nice wide open register, which is great. And utilizing that as well, so you're not just speaking on one level. Most people use around about 20% of their potential their chest register.
Wow.
So their chest register is mainly for men, what they speak in, and for women it's predominantly in their head voice, but they're not really engaging their chest resonance as well. So we use about 20% of that area. So there's a lot of area that we can get into. And as soon as you start getting into that area when you're speaking, then the more variety, the more variety that you have, and then therefore the less novelty and the less distractions you'll get, hopefully, from your audience. So the next thing is that's pitch, and there's a lot more about pitch. And there's 4 registers that I could talk about, but there's also tone as well. So different tones of voice. So a lot of people speak just purely from the throat, and they have one, maybe you might describe it as a monotone. It's just sort of one voice that they're talking about, one volume, one tone. And after a while, people are going to tune out, especially if you're speaking for 40 minutes. So that can be very hard to, so by varying your tone, using more chest resonance or more what's called mask area to project the sound, you might use a little bit of combination of those things. It's all about variety
Wow.
in the voice. So that tone wise, and then dynamics. So occasionally, if you're shouting, if you're constantly saying, okay, so what's really interesting is what we did last
Yes.
term, right?
Yeah.
Is we managed to increase the ROI by, if that's at that level all the time, people are going to start looking in the phones.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So but so bringing the volume down a little bit, just occasionally, to a little bit less, or even sometimes a whisper, depending on where you are. So especially if you've got a headset on, then you can use the microphone. So
Yes.
if I'm, for instance, using this microphone, I can go much closer to the microphone. I get much more of a bass response, and I don't have to speak hardly at all. Which is very different than if you're at this level all the time.
Wow. Wow. Oh my goodness. What a masterclass. Let me ask you one last question, because
Sure.
this has
Have
been
I been waffling on for ages? I'm so
no,
sorry,
this
James.
is
Yeah.
brilliant. I have loved this. I love being able to go
Mm,
deep into it. And I know it's going to help many of our listeners.
mm,
There's a difference, it feels like, from someone who walks, up in front of the room as they're going to
mm,
communicate,
mm,
uh, who has confidence and who
mhm.
has a command of the room.
Yeah.
How do we do that without coming across as arrogant, still being authentic, but not being, so overpowerful, making it all about us, but still having a humble command of the room and coming
Yep.
across as a confident speaker?
Yep. Very interesting question. So I would say it's about authenticity, and that the authenticity is a difficult word. I think being genuine is probably a better
Mm,
phrase. And I think that's really, really key, is that people will straight away see you as being arrogant if you try to be clever, and if you try to, use certain terminology, etc. And I think there's definitely a way to, talk. Speaking is about conversation. So even though you might be speaking at an event, which is a monologue, you want to think about it as a conversation. You want to take everything away from you. It's not. It's and we. This is not about you. It's about the audience, and
yep.
that's the thing. Is to be absolutely as genuine as you can, and as be. The focus should be on the passion you have for the subject, and not about how much you know about the subject. I think that is
Ooh.
really, really clear.
Sorry,
So that
I had to make sure I
no,
wrote that one down, because that, I mean,
yeah,
that is absolute gold.
mm,
Because that's where so many of us, we struggle, because we were like, hey, I studied, I know all of this stuff.
yeah,
I can't wait to tell you what I know, instead
yeah,
of I can't wait to help you solve the problem you're facing.
yes,
That was just gold.
absolutely, yes, I totally agree.
Okay, so if somebody only has a few minutes to
Mm,
prepare, you know, last question as we kind of wrap up our conversation, and they're,
mm,
someone comes with them and says, hey, so and so just get hit by a bus, you're going to have to get up. Uh,
mm,
what's one thing they should focus on? That kind of last minute, like, okay,
yeah,
I can do that. And we talked a little bit about it earlier in the show, but
mm,
as we've kind of come down to the end,
mm.
what's one thing that they could really drill in on?
I think story, actually.
Mm.
I would go story, and I would start thinking about, I mean, it's very difficult if all of a sudden you've got to speak, but speak about what you're passionate about, and speak about, and try to include, and it's something, I'll be completely transparent with you. It's something that have been, really searching inwardly for the last couple of years is about my story and how that can help people rather than tell my story about what my experience. Because I don't know about you, but I don't really feel that I've got much of a story. I was literally having a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of hours ago, and we were talking about story, and I said, I don't really have. Jimmy, you've got thousands of stories. I've known you for 20 years. Don't be ridiculous. So I think we all have a story. We all have an anecdote. We all have an experience that we can share. And I think people that's the genuine experience of that we can share with people. And I think that's really, really key. And I
Oh,
think that would be my focus. Yeah.
that's so powerful. Speaking of
Mm,
story, I'm going to ask you a couple rapid fire questions here in a second, but I'm
yeah.
so curious with all your years of singing.
Mm.
What was the best or the most grand or the most memorable stage you ever sang from?
Well, I this is name dropping now. Can I name drop?
I would love it. Let's go.
Okay. Well, it wasn't singing; it was backing vocals and saxophone. And I toured with Tom Jones, so I did about 6 months with Tom Jones.
Come on.
Yeah, back in 2012. You can find me on YouTube. Well, you can find if you yeah, I'm on my YouTube channel. There's a couple of videos of me playing with him, and it was it was amazing. It was great, and it's sort of thing when you get the call, you think. Have they got the right person? And I tell you a quick story about that is that
Yeah.
I play tenor saxophone and I've and the call was I now know the guy, the MD, and in the band, and a chap called Oro, and he phoned me and said, Jimmy, look, I might be needing a saxophone player, and I can't tell you who it is yet, but do you play baritone? And I said, "Yes, I do." And I had never played baritone before. So, right. I mean, actually, it's very similar. It's one of the saxophones, obviously, as you know. So I played tenor, but it's a slightly different embouchure. It's like
Sure.
you play trumpet, don't you? So it's like you playing, tenor horn or euphonium or something.
Yep.
It's good. You're going to have to. You need a few weeks to get used to the embouchure and the intonation, etc. So I thought that was ridiculous. The fact that I ended up playing baritone in the brass section and tenor as well, and backing vocals as well. But so yeah, that was a great experience.
But the lesson there is you say yes.
Yeah, listen, it's just to say yes. Oh yes.
like like when
Yeah,
I shared with you off camera when someone came to me and said, "Hey, could you put together some content for our
yeah,
bank?" And I was like,
yeah.
"Yes." And then later you're
Exactly.
like, "Okay, I've got to build the
Yeah.
great content. I mean,
Yeah,
we can do
absolutely. I
this."
don't. It's certainly not a fake it till you make it. I think it's
Yep.
you already have the knowledge and the experience. You've just got to transfer those skills.
Yes. Well, let me ask you some rapid fire questions.
Yeah,
We're
sure.
building this online library for
Mm,
communicators. Go be
great,
inspired with new resources. Is
amazing.
there a speaker? We talk about speakers a lot on
Mm,
here. Is there a speaker that every time you hear them, you're just like, oh, they're so good. Fill my cup.
mm,
I got to tell somebody about their presentation message, whatever it is.
mm, mm. Well, yeah, there is a chap called Sir Ken Robinson,
Oh yeah.
and right. So the late and the great Sir Ken Robinson, and his. If you haven't seen it, which I'm sure you have, if you haven't seen it, please do. It's a TEDx talk. It's absolutely phenomenal. He talks about education, and I think it's particularly about the UK. But it's just his humility and his wonderful humble way of presenting with story and reflection and humor, and it's just so well put together. And if you want to see someone who is completely genuine on stage, that's the guy that's the talk to watch.
Mm, I love that. If you're a podcast listener, is there a guilty pleasure or a development podcast that you just
Oh
keep
yeah,
going
well
back
that
to?
might yeah, my guilty pleasure. I can't. Yeah, my guilty pleasure is well, two actually probably. Is Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett. I mean, it's very very famous. I know. And also I'm a bit of a fan of Daniel Priestley and
Oh yeah.
Oversubscribed, and yeah. So that's two. I'll be quite honest with you. I've got two reasonably young children, and so I don't have a huge amount of time to sit there. I wish I did to sit there either, if I had time, I would be listening to more podcasts and listening to more jazz.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Cannot go wrong with more jazz.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
and then lastly, is there a book? Someone's about to,
Yeah,
go on a venture and you're like, you got to read this one book if there's no other book.
yeah. Shall I'll get it for you. It's the one I mentioned earlier on.
Oh,
Actually,
yes.
I'm going to slide over with my chair. Hang on. Here we are. So it's this one, which is
Yes.
Presence by Patsy Rodenberg. So this is very interesting. Just very briefly, if we've got time, Jason,
Yeah.
is that it talks about 3 circles of confidence: first circle, second circle, and third circle. And if you're anxious or lacking self-confidence, or you're feeling that you might be judged when you speak, your voice is going to be, your presence is going to be. Presence is how you present yourself in the room, how you interact within the space that you're in. And if you're in first circle, you're generally going to be shy, lacking of confidence, and you're going to have a voice that is not quite cutting through. If you're in second circle, you're in this sort of ideal balance of having the right sort of volume and variety in tone in your voice. And then if you're in third circle, you're the person that is, maybe I could, if I could sort of stereotype the alpha male, if I
Yes.
that you're in third circle. So we're looking for second circle, and there's lots of attributes and lots of techniques in the book to get you into second circle. And that's sort of my main goal, is to get people into that second circle when I work with them.
I love that. And there's nothing wrong with second chair, like those of us who have been in band. I
Ab-
mean, first chair is
Absolutely.
not the only one that exists.
No, and it's a regular gig, right?
Right. Oh, Jimmy, this has been so
Yeah,
powerful. You've given us a master class. Where's the best place we can send people to find out more about you online, connect with you, all that kind of stuff?
sure. What jimmycannon.com. Jimmycannon.com is that's the website.
Yep. Be absolutely
Wonderful. Well,
fantastic.
thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Have loved it. Thank you for just being so generous with your
Mm,
expertise. I know for me, as a speaker, so many of the things you've already taught us. I know you're going to be able to help elevate my speaking. So thank you, and
right.
really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jason. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the Speakers Group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.